Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the One Small Step listening event. I'm Alice Daniel. I'm the news director at KVPR, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some of our Small Step participants in the next hour. Over the past 6 months, we've been collecting lots of conversations between San Joaquin Valley residents with differing political views. Sometimes the conversations focus on where those political opinions originated. Sometimes the conversations are just two people talking about their lives, as the goal during this very divisive time is to help people to find common ground or some shared humanity. KVPR was one of 6 public radio stations nationwide selected to participate in this year's One Small Step project. We were joined by Alaska Public Media, High Plains Public Radio, Oklahoma City's KOSU, Reno's KUNR, and Vermont Public Radio. What you'll hear now is a sizzle reel, a compilation of conversation segments from all of the stations who are part of this initiative.
What made you want to do this interview today?
Seems to me like we live in a time that people don't listen as well as perhaps they used to.
I live in a tiny village where there are about 50 or 60 people. I just kind of thought it'd be fun to see what people outside of the village sound like.
Hola, mi nombre es Diego Sarazúa. Nos encontramos en Nevada.
I live in Bakersfield, California.
And we're in beautiful Amarillo, Texas.
I get a lot of joy out of just conversations with people.
Well, you know what? I enjoy talking to people too. That's a real Oklahoma thing, isn't it?
I think it is.
Could you briefly describe in your own words your personal political values?
That's a loaded question, huh?
Yeah.
I would describe myself as a fiscally conservative person.
I'm definitely more liberal leaning.
I don't know. I don't even know if conservative means what conservative used to mean. I'm not even sure liberal means what it used to mean.
If we didn't know each other and I met you on the road and you had a flat tire and I'm going to help you, I have no care what your politics are.
Exactly. That's Kansas.
In Alaska, sometimes you got to humble yourself and say, hey, what's your perspective on this? Can you help me out?
We depend on one another up here.
Yeah.
I want to believe that people who maybe have different points of view still have the same end goals in life and can talk about things without being upset with each other. Was I who you expected me to be?
Yes and no. Like, you're more human than the archetype in my head, obviously.
Well, I'm glad.
Qué bonita tu historia. Gracias por todo eso.
I just really enjoyed this conversation, actually. So, I mean,
I have too.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, Dan, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, Nick, if you find yourself planning to be in the St. Albans area, give me a shout. Be glad to show you my orchards.
That would be awesome.
I am honored to have met you.
I will treasure this friendship. Thank you so much.
That was just a taste of the kinds of conversations that have taken place over the past 6 months. And, you know, someone has to facilitate and produce these conversations. And KVPR was fortunate enough to team up with Sonia Miermond, who has a master's in public history and training in oral history. Tonight, Sonia will share edited segments with you from 3 of the One Small Step conversations she facilitated, and then ask questions of the 6 participants. But before we jump into that, Sonia, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your own experience. Could you talk a little about the selection process for One Small Step?
Yeah, so the beginning of the process started with an online forum that asked people about some of their political views, asked them to fill out a short bio, and then from there, I would contact people and ask a few follow-up questions. And people found out about the project in a variety of ways. So some people found out through the station, through listening to KVPR, others through the newsletter. But then we had some other outreach efforts. So Some of those included the Tulare County Library Bookmobile. I followed them along on their route and went to some interesting places. Went up to Badger, went to some small towns around Tulare County, and that was really a cool experience. I presented to a few Rotary clubs and Lions Club. I tabled at the Visalia Farmers Market. So we had to get pretty creative, and it was a really good opportunity to meet new people as well, and turn them on to this project. So once they put in their application, I reached out, asked a few follow-up questions, which kind of gave me a sense of who might be a good match for them. And then we would go from there.
So it sounds like a lot of those efforts turned out to be pretty fruitful. I know it was challenging to find particularly people who were more on the conservative side. And pairing people is also challenging. Was there a process or some kind of guidelines that you used to pair people?
Pairing people was probably my favorite part of the project, actually. It was a bit like matchmaking, maybe reverse matchmaking. So I would pair people, obviously, who had different political, social, economic kind of ideologies. But I also paired people based on some similarities. So, people who had similar professions, maybe, or maybe experienced some major life event similarly. I wanted people to come from some common level of understanding, common level of truth. And then from there, people have different opinions and different thoughts on how we get to A to B. But, at our core, we all want the best for our families and for ourselves.
Right. And I recall you paired 2 missionaries, and I think there were 2 former naval officers.
It
did turn out okay.
Yeah, we'll be hearing a bit from them later. It was really interesting to kind of explore how people who do have similar kind of foundations, how they do differ in their opinions and why. So that was also kind of my rationale behind that.
And I'm sure you, as a public historian and as someone who's done oral history projects, I'm sure you learned quite a lot from this process. And I'm wondering, what would you say some of your takeaways are?
Yeah, so I guess my oral history background kind of it informed my approach in that I see every single participant as a history bearer in their own right. We're living through a historic moment, and all of our personal individual stories, give testimony to that. So I really wanted the people who are participating in this project to understand the greater impact, that your story does. If you wanted to, the story does end up in the Library of Congress archives. People will have access to it in the future. If they want to understand what happened, everyone experienced the 2020 elections and COVID and everything in such a personal way. And those personal stories matter. And personally, what I learned as a facilitator, I learned so much. I learned how to listen better and more deeply. I learned that we all want the best for ourselves and for our families. I think I realized there's a lot more kind of bipartisan like issues that we don't hear much about. I think often we think we're more different than we really are. But I know that in the San Joaquin Valley, a lot of people care about climate change. We have different ways that we approach it, and different policies maybe that we care about, but we all care about it because it affects us deeply here. So it was really an honor to facilitate these conversations, and I really did learn so much.
Exactly. And what we learn in One Small Step and in journalism is that everyone has a story. Mm-hmm. And so and everyone's story is interesting when you really start to dig down.
Yeah.
If you would go ahead then, and let's just get started. And why don't you introduce us to the first pair, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So tonight we'll be hearing from 3 conversation partners. And the first the first pair we'll hear from today is Wes and Dina. So Wes is a former Southern Baptist minister turned atheist philosophy professor. And Dina is a medical professional who converted to the Southern Baptist faith later in life. And they both navigate the world in ways that defy stereotypes. So let's listen to their conversation.
Yes, I do. I don't know if you've always seen the memes and stuff of the atheist philosophy professor. There's movies about us. We're always the bad guys. I always feel like I have to be extra careful when students, especially because, the Central Valley is a little more conservative area. I don't have that much of a vested interest in changing your mind. I have a wife and kids and a new grandbaby, and that's what I want to focus my attention on, not making you good liberals or good atheists. I don't care about that.
Stereotype. Yeah.
Stereotype.
Yeah.
I do feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, read my bio, you could try to stereotype me right away, right? And we have a lot of that, unfortunately, in this country.
And speaking of stereotypes, you break the stereotypes, right? And so I had to adjust my thinking around this kind of stereotype, and I just thought, wow, I bet you feel really different as somebody who is a Black female professional who is a Republican. And I know that's just a weird kind of racial stereotype, but that was one of the first things that I thought of when I read the bio.
I think all of my life I've had to correct people's thoughts of me. I was raised in Puerto Rico, so I spoke Spanish. When I spoke English, I spoke it with a heavy Spanish accent. And so when I moved to the States, because I came to the States when I was in high school, and of course, the other high school students are like, oh, wow, she's weird, right? Because I've had this Spanish accent and here's a Black person talking. So I had to deal with that. A lot of times people, especially people of color, various colors, and I'm sure your wife has even been through this, you're portrayed one way, but if they get to know you a little bit, they'll find out, oh, this person, it's not actually like that. And that's part of the difficulty is breaking down those stereotypical barriers and really getting to know that person, getting past that curtain.
Yeah.
Well, I have appreciated talking with you very much.
You too.
Very much too. And if I see you on the street, I'll be able to say hi, Wes.
I would love for you to do that. And if I see you, I will do the same.
Now, I may not recognize you without the pink headphones, though. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I wear these all the time, actually. Yeah, I'm never without these pink headphones. So you won't have to worry about that.
So that was Dina and Wes. Unfortunately, they weren't able to join us for today's listening event, but I caught up with them on Tuesday and we chatted a bit about their conversation. The technology was not on our side that night. So Dina's camera was not working, but we did have a really engaging conversation regardless. So yeah, I'll share that with you right now too.
Start off with asking Wes, what made you want to take part in the program to begin with?
I think, I think I even said this in the initial interview that it's kind of disheartening to see no one speaking with one another anymore. And it feels like there's just a greater and greater divide between people. I feel it in my own family. People who weren't even political at one point are now extremely political, and how much politics divides people. And when I heard what you guys were doing with the program, and I heard some of the interviews that were kind of the sample interviews that One Small Step did, I just thought it was a really interesting project and kind of a promising project for people to start communicating and engage in dialogue with one another, which doesn't seem to happen much. People talk about each other a lot, but not to each other. And so that's why I thought it would be something fun to participate in.
And Dina, I'm going to throw the same question to you.
Okay, I agree with Wes for the things that he stated. And then also, one of my complaints to my friends and family, they hear this a lot, is that the music from the 70s and 80s was so much friendlier. Songs were about caring about each other and There wasn't so much pride involved and attitude and throwing ugliness out there. So I kind of feel like we're missing out in the being willing to be civil to each other and open with one another and agreeing to disagree. That used to be the saying of the day, agree to disagree, and that was okay. Now if you disagree, someone wants to attack you. So that was one of the reasons. I thought it was nice for the opportunity to discuss openly with someone who thinks totally differently than I did. And I thought, well, that person is being just as open-minded as I am, if they're willing to do it also.
Yeah, that's true. It takes a special kind of people to come into the one small step space. And I guess that brings me to my next question. And I'm going to throw it to you, Dina. What was it about talking to a stranger that made this project appealing? I feel like a lot of people would be kind of scared about doing that, and that's the reaction I got about people who I approached about the project sometimes. So yeah, I'm just curious to know, what was it appealing that it was a stranger, or did it make you nervous?
No, I thought it was a little bit of a challenge, which, I don't mind that. I knew it was safe since they were going to be in a different location than I was. So that didn't come into play. And I thought it would be interesting to hear what a stranger might have to say. I know what my friends have to say. So I thought that might be something interesting.
Wes, I'm gonna have you answer the same question as well.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, speaking to a stranger about these things is easier than speaking to family about it. You worry about ruining relationships, and you worry about not being able to have those same kind of conversations you did with someone. I know the part that you played on the radio was a part that I wouldn't let my mother hear. My mother is still very much in denial that her son is an atheist, because I used to be a pastor. And so she still has a lot of problems with that, and having conversations with her about those things kind of puts a strain on the relationship. But when you engage, I think, with strangers, sometimes it's a little bit easier to be yourself. You don't have to be as guarded about things. And so I think in one way it was appealing. And another way, I agree with Dina, that it can be a little intimidating. I think as a professional philosopher, we're always kind of engaged in conversations with people that we don't agree with. So that wasn't, as daunting as it might be for people who aren't used to those kind of dialogues. But still, it's you'd never know what to expect with someone if they're going to come at you. And like Dina said, people tend to be very, very aggressive with their political beliefs these days. And so you never know what you're going to get when you're speaking with a stranger. So I guess it can be daunting, but in ways it's a little bit safer than speaking to family members, or at least for me it was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've gotten that feedback from a few people, and it's been interesting. And I'm curious, have either of you had one small step conversations of your own with like people in your circles, family, friends, since doing the project?
So go ahead, Dina, sorry.
No, I wouldn't say since doing the project necessarily. I thought it was interesting that, and I think I shared this with you, Sonia, that when I tried to bring in a couple of other coworkers thinking that they might be interested in having an open-minded and friendly conversation with someone who thought differently, I was kind of surprised that the immediate response was no way. They had no interest in doing it. Yet they were always expressing their views, individually at work. So I thought the opportunity would be appealing to them. And I was so totally wrong.
And I think for me, it's, it's so easy to get kind of wrapped into an echo chamber or epistemic bubble. You know, you have friends, my friends are college professors, and they tend to be think like me. And so you kind of think that everybody in the world thinks like you. And I'm not on social media, but I know that people who are on social media kind of get that feel that somebody has to be crazy to think differently. And so for me, it is a little bit harder to find people to have those kind of conversations with. I think there's been a little bit more around at least my workplace because of vaccine mandates and that kind of things, where I'm a bioethicist. My specialization in philosophy is bioethics. And so I did a lot of stuff with public health and that kind of thing. And then to hear some of my colleagues who are very adamantly opposed to vaccine mandates at the school and that kind of thing, there's been some dialogue with that since we've had this conversation. But I rarely get opportunities to, speak with people who have vastly different views than I do. I guess we just kind of easily fall into these insulated groups that all kind of think alike. And so we just bounce sound off of one another on things we agree with. So it is kind of rare for me to find somebody that thinks differently.
Well, what's something that I guess you took from your conversation with Dina that might be something in a different circumstance that you could not just family, but even with friends?
Well, I think maybe in that way, then I think a lot of times the ways to get out of echo chambers and epistemic bubbles and all of those things are through relationships and meeting somebody and talking to someone and laughing with someone. Dina made fun of my pink headphones and we had a good connection with that. And her dog was barking in the background and it humanized her. And so I think just maybe that humanizing, the humanization of somebody that before, they're just a set of ideas, they're just a set of political points of view. But when you talk with them and you laugh with them and you engage with them in that way, then I think maybe you can start seeking out people who are different than you. And you're not just thinking and you're not letting those political views kind of shut you off from that possibility. So maybe that I would take that relationships are good and smiling at one another and looking at one another is very helpful in having conversations like that.
And I think that, first of all, in order for that to work, the very first thing is you have to be willing to be a little open-minded.
Yeah, that's right. Being that first step, that one small step, signing up for the project.
It's a big step. It is a big step.
It is. It is a big step.
One thing that got me with Wes is, and I don't necessarily agree here, but I very much respected that Wes had the strength to change from being a pastor to being an atheist. That was a huge, huge, huge step. And I feel like he had to know himself well to be confident enough to make that change and go against all the ingrained, documentary from his family, let's put it that way, that he grew up with in order to take on that position. So I had a lot of respect for him to actually do that.
Yeah, that's right. It's the strength to learn and unlearn, right? From wherever we come from, right? All right. Well,
to change, not just to accept what his family gave him and what he grew up with, but on his own, he found a different path, and he felt confident in that path.
And it sounds like that was kind of your experience as well. And we talked a little bit about, just your background, Dina, and how, it you very much learned from your experiences to become and to form the beliefs that you had today. And I really admired, your story. You spoke about immigration, at least from your parents, and, being in a very different circumstance with people's expectations on you, what language you were supposed to speak and what beliefs you were supposed to have. And I thought that was something very courageous on your part, that you were able to not just, I think it's really easy to go in that path of least resistance when people's expectations are a certain way for you, that you defy those expectations. And so maybe that was something that we had in common, that you defied the expectations of what people would place on you because of race, because of language, because of all of those things, traveled your own path. I admire that as well.
Well, as I told you, we have a lot of common ground.
We do.
Yeah. You guys both
You're right.
took the path of most resistance, if anything. That's what you've got in common, which is pretty awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing these beautiful reflections with me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your participation in the project.
All right, so that was Wes and Dina sharing some of their reflections about One Small Step. And next, we're going to hear from Barbara and Helen. So Barbara and Helen both spent time in Colombia as missionaries, and they both currently live in Fresno. The experience in Colombia impacted both of them profoundly. Barbara extended her stay well beyond her one-year commitment, and Helen's politics shifted to the left after she moved back to the U.S. So they start their conversation by introducing each other. So let's hear from them.
My name is Barbara.
My name is Helen.
I'm talking from Fresno, California.
Barbara is my conversation partner.
We're going to get to know each other. Helen, she says, I am a Jesus follower. After college, taught elementary school in Cali, Colombia, then married and taught in Kinshasa, Congo.
Barbara says, I am a 79-year-old woman born and raised in New Jersey. Big positive events would include becoming a Christian and serving 21 years as a missionary in Bogota, Colombia.
We got a lot in common, don't we?
We do, yeah. So you were in Bogota for all of those 21 years?
All of those 21 years. I went down for a year. But time takes a long time to pass.
Wow.
Helen, what made you want to do this interview today?
Well, I wanted to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. What made you want to do this interview today?
I thought it would be really fun to get to know somebody that was brand new and just show myself and show you and show whoever winds up listening to this that people can talk even when they don't agree on things.
Absolutely. I used to be a Republican because I came from Kansas, and that's what my people were. But it seemed to me that during the past years, they have gotten very militaristic and capitalistic. So that's probably the main reason I usually vote Democratic.
I think I should call myself a Republicrat. I am registered as a Republican, but I am deeply troubled by a lot of stuff that they're saying. And I'm troubled by some stuff the Democrats are saying. So maybe I'll just start my own party. Helen, is there something about my beliefs you don't agree with but still respect?
I guess you're talk about the right to own a gun. That part I don't really agree with because I don't think guns are the answer to anything. Is there something that of my beliefs that you don't agree with but you respect?
Well, you mentioned immigration, and I wondered you didn't elaborate on that, and I'd be curious because pretty much I feel we are on the same wavelength. I'm getting that sense, which is kind of nice.
We need to put way less money into military and policing, and way more money into counselors and helpers at the border, so that, I mean, we don't need a wall. We need people to know, to decide what to do for these immigrants, and and negotiate together with Mexico and the Central American countries, and see if we can help them get on the right track so people don't have to leave.
At the same time, I feel for the people, the North Americans who live on the border, and they don't feel safe in their own homes anymore because they never know who's going to be out in the yard when they go out there in the morning. Some of them are just struggling families trying to get through, and some of them aren't. Right now, we've got people in the United States who are unemployed because they don't want to work. And we've got these new people coming in who probably do want to work. And, I'm glad I'm not in government.
Right. How would you like to be remembered? Like, I sometimes think about what I would like on my tombstone. And how would you like to be remembered, Barbara?
I would like to be remembered as somebody who loved God. Yeah, I want to be remembered as somebody who made God smile, who loved God. How about you?
I would like to be remembered for being a loving grandma, and one that, and a person who loved the Lord and served Him. What a special time this has been.
This has been wonderful.
This has been so super. I want to get to know you better, Barbara. Is that a possibility?
We're happy to report that One Small Step conversation partners, Barbara and Helen, did in fact meet up in person, and they told us they could have talked for hours.
All right, so I'm going to invite Barbara and Helen to join me to reflect a bit on that conversation. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Helen.
Hi there.
Hello.
Here. Thank you for joining us. So I guess I'll start off with a question for both of you. What did you expect this conversation to be like before you entered the One Small Step virtual space? Because at that time, it was still virtual conversations. Barbara, I'll ask you to start us off. What did you expect the conversation to be like?
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know if it was going to be confrontational or just sharing information or what. It was kind of, well, here goes.
Yeah.
And Helen, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely thought we would be more different than the same. I was expecting someone from another culture, actually, and I was really happy to find Barbara.
Yeah, and like you all heard at the end of that recording, that was from Valley Edition with Kathleen Schock, and Kathleen Schock mentioned that you both met up in person afterwards. So what was that like, meeting up in person after having that kind of virtual online conversation?
It was fun. We just chatted about goodness knows whatever. I think we didn't pursue our differences. We were just having fun discovering more and more of our similarities.
Right. In fact,
and had good coffee.
Yeah.
That's important.
And we also found that we had a friend in common.
Oh.
That we had known for a while.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wow. Small world.
Yeah. It was so cool.
And Barbara, I remember when I was talking to you before, at the beginning of all this process, and you mentioned to me that you do have these kinds of conversations. Was it with your siblings who have different beliefs from you? And I'm just curious, do you have advice for people who want to, maybe approach more kind of political conversations with family, with friends, based on your experience?
I gotta be really careful what I say here because I think my sister's watching. No, not really. If you love each other, talk about stuff. I think something she and I have learned is we're not going to change each other. We tried pretty hard for a while, but I have felt that is less important now. We just need to love each other, share what we believe, and know what the other person believes, but trying to change each other through argument isn't going to work, so why bother?
Yeah,
That's true.
I have siblings as well that think totally different from my beliefs, and we talk about it, and we kind of set the ground rules. Yes, we're going to respect each other and what they and we think. Yeah, and it works.
It sounds like you've both adopted one small step approaches even before participating in the program, with the ground rules and the commitment to listen and not try to change each other's minds. So that's pretty awesome. Well, thank you so much, Barbara and Helen, for joining us. I appreciate you guys taking the time and stepping into this project as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us. It's been
Oh,
fun.
yeah, it has been a fun road. Thank you so much for doing this for the whole valley and for all of us who participated.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we'll turn our attention to our last conversation. So you'll be hearing next from Tony and Nathan. So Tony and Nathan both served in the Navy, and they both credit that experience as being very pivotal in both of their lives. Their conversation covered a lot of ground, but one theme that kept coming up was, where and when can we have important conversations about politics, about society, and who can we have them with? So let's take a listen to Tony and Nathan's conversation.
Is bumper sticker politics. Like, if something fits on a bumper sticker, well, that's great. But man, that is usually either misinformed or just totally off base. But it looks good on a bumper sticker, right?
I totally feel you on that one. I really do.
Tony, what made you want to do this interview today?
Most of my family has passed now. We took care of my mom until she passed, and then her elder sister got sick. So it was my wife and I have no brothers or sisters. So we were already isolated, and that was taking its toll. And hey, we're going to be free. No, COVID happened. So when I lived in the Bay Area, we frequented bars, and there's lots of conversation going on. So many different kinds of people. But they wanted to be there. They wanted to be engaged.
Sure.
So that's what really made a difference.
Yeah.
There was no chest thumping.
Yeah.
You could just talk about something. So I really do miss that part, and especially since we had our isolation since before COVID.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
This is Nathan's bio. Boys is hard. My name is Nathan, and I'm never what most people assume and defy most stereotypes. I've lived around the world. My dad was in the Navy, as was I. I'm passionate about climate change and an advocate for what would most consider liberal causes. First thing I would ask, what'd you do in the Navy?
I flew in the Navy, so I was not a pilot. I was actually the guy in the back seat. So if that makes
The
any
Rio?
sense. Yep, the Rio, the Wizzo, and both the F-14 and F-18.
Okay.
That's what I did.
Okay. The F-4 is one of my favorite planes.
Yeah, I would love to be able to sit in the back seat.
Oh,
or
man.
front seat of one of those. I've never had the opportunity.
I myself was in the Navy, and I was a hull tech.
Awesome.
So
HT,
so,
huh?
yeah,
Nice,
yeah.
nice.
So that was 85 to 88.
Okay.
So yeah, we had a little commonality right there.
Much to many people's surprise, I tend to be much more liberal. They see you see white guy in the Central Valley, former military, and they just make an assumption. I usually keep my cards close to the vest on purpose. You know, there never seems to be a good time to talk about stuff. I feel like the way that I was raised was, hey, politics is not talked about in the workplace, and frankly, I don't want to talk about it over the holidays. I'd like to just enjoy being with friends and family.
It seems unfortunate. I talk about sports politics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you're either all in or you're all out. And to me, that's irrational. I call myself conservative, and I don't like some conservative ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I like finding solutions, and that's been one of the things. Again, you're fixing your car, you're making a piece of jewelry, anything. Sometimes you run into problems. I like finding solutions to problems. And so that's me ultimately is not the party, but the practicality.
All right, so this is Tony's bio. I'm from the Central Valley in California. Things that shaped me. Firstly, learning auto mechanics, joining the Navy, being a building manager, a professional jeweler, and a professional locksmith. I am Tejano/Native American by birth. That is fascinating. Man, I wish we had more than however much time we have here just to figure out how do all these dots get connected, because, man, that's just a
it's crazy
collection.
Yeah, it is.
Fascinating.
Well, it's crazy, but it was just basically just trying to keep above water, but I had to learn adaptability because it does sound wacky. From you went to doing jewelry to managing an apartment building. It's a little wacky.
Well, yeah, but it seems to me like you had opportunities and you took them. You're an interesting guy.
You're an interesting guy.
I would love to it probably sounds cliche. I'd love to learn more. If I were to pass you on the street, I'd have no idea of everything that you've seen and done, and your experiences.
Yeah. No, thank you. And sure, I would love to meet up with you again. We can talk about other things.
Talk
it's
about something.
Yeah. Well, we'd have something to talk about, no matter what.
So that was Tony and Nathan, who I will invite now to reflect on their conversation with me. All right. Hi, Nathan.
Hello.
Tony.
Good evening.
Well, thank you both for joining us. Oh, something's happening with Tony's camera. Hopefully that will resolve itself. Can you hear us, Tony?
I can.
Okay. Your camera's gone all green for some reason, but
it looks fine on this end. And I've had that hangover maybe.
Maybe it's like for the holiday season,
Yeah.
a little bit of a theme.
I forgot the tinsel.
All right. Well, hopefully that will resolve itself, but we can hear you and you can hear us. So that's the important thing. So I guess I'll start off with, what did you expect your partner to be like before? Oh, Tony's back. Awesome. What did you expect your partner to be like before meeting one another? Nathan, I'll start with you.
I wasn't quite sure because Tony's bio was so unique and interesting. It was tough to, maybe this is better in the long run, tough to form really kind of a stereotype. It was a unique collection of experiences and backgrounds. So walking into it, I think I said this when we met, it was akin to a blind date of sorts. You didn't quite know what you were getting into, but I was curious, and it seemed like it was going to be a great conversation. As has been mentioned, never quite sure if it was going to be confrontational or quite friendly, and it ended up being quite friendly and quite enjoyable.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that it was a good experience for you. And Tony, what about you? What did you expect of your conversation partner before you came into the space?
Honestly, I didn't try to have a preconception. I really just wanted to keep an open mind, and whatever it was is whatever it was.
And I didn't think it was going to come to blows or anything. So, so no, I don't like to assume on people because people assume on me often enough, and it doesn't match. So I'd rather not. But Nathan's a great guy, and I really, really enjoyed talking with both of you. So yeah, that was totally positive. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's like a very special thing about everyone who signs up for One Small Step is you're all people who don't have preconceived notions of one another because you don't want people to do that to you, right? So maybe you're a self-selecting crowd in that way, but yeah, that's a very special thing about this project. And you both kind of spoke about how there's never a right time or a right place to talk about politics, to talk about, these kind of deeper conversations. I was wondering if you guys, could expand on that a little bit. And if, since having this conversation, if you've reflected on that theme and if there are places that you think you could bring these conversations into moving forward. Nathan, I'll start with you.
Yes, I think that the clip and the segments that you shared hit the nail on the head. I still feel that way, where it's just there never seems to be the right time and place to discuss. Hey, why do you feel that way? And maybe that's just because we all lead busy lives and whatnot. And like I said, before the interview or since the interview, Thanksgiving's come and gone, and that was still that time when it just wasn't the time when I wanted to get into politics. But Tony and I we're sailors, right? So we went out and had a beer, which was a great time. And I still feel like we're at that stage where we're just trying to better understand each other's backgrounds. But you get to a certain point, and I think this is leading to a great opportunity to have these actual conversations, that have been hard to come by, just because you're never quite sure, if the person you're speaking with really cares, really wants to get into it, or is going to be combative, or just is not interested. So I'm pleasantly surprised, and like I said, I think future conversations are in the making, and I look forward to it.
And Tony, what about you? I guess, could you kind of, do you see yourself being able to have conversations like these in other spaces now that One Small Step has kind of primed you?
Well, it's just a question, and I think honesty of maturity. We don't have to fly off the handle if we have a different viewpoint. I talked about logic and reason and good fellowship. So again, that goes back to, I want to find solutions. I don't want to divide us. You want to believe what you believe, whatever deity that is. I'm not here to change your mind. As long as we can, you've got yours, I got mine. Why can't we just talk? Mm-hmm. So that's, again, and unfortunately right now in this time, that would be really, really tough, I think, to just find somebody you could strike up a conversation about just anything and talk about it like adults.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you both met up afterwards for a beer. And Nathan, I remember you saying that you were moving coincidentally near to where Tony lives, right? Like you're coincidentally going to become neighbors.
Well, maybe not neighbors, but definitely a few miles closer. So right. I think it'll be easier to find somewhere to meet in the middle. Moving from still in Fresno County, but moving to Madera.
Oh, nice. So One Small Step facilitated potential neighbor friendships.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Literally creating community.
And we're meeting up again this weekend. So.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Nice.
We're going to go to a different place, but. I met my wife, met Nathan's wife, Tracy, and
we had a great time. We had a wonderful time. And it's just to me, it's a shame that it has to be so far and few in between, you know, and you know, that's just sad right now, and it doesn't help anything.
Well, we're doing what we can to take a few small steps to fix that. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us, Tony and Nathan, and for participating in the project. And yeah, have a great holiday season, and good luck with the conversations with the family.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful experience,
Thank
and
you.
I'm grateful for the chance to meet somebody like Tony. It's definitely been a great thing.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the chance to meet both of you and participate in this.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night. All right. So we want to leave you all with something to take with you into the holiday season, gathering with friends, gathering with family, so that you can potentially take the one small step approach in your own lives. So I've got some takeaways here that I would like to share with you all. If you bear with me while I share my screen in the era of Zoom. All right. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. So One Small Step has put together this really helpful slide deck. And, you know, these are all some tips that we could all probably use in our own lives. But something that kept coming up with this project is the importance of listening actively. So practicing genuine curiosity about your conversation partner's life, and acknowledging that you both have really different worldviews, and how your experiences have shaped your worldviews. And the core of every One Small Step conversation is that it is a respectful conversation and it is personal. So, you know, steering away from the ideological and really sticking to the personal kind of things that affect all of us and that we can all relate to. And also being comfortable with disagreeing with each other. Sometimes disagreeing can actually be healthy, and like Tony said earlier, we don't need to fly off the handle, and we can just acknowledge the validity of someone else's point of view. And you know, it's important to also go in with intention, and not intending to duke out politics, but more so intending to have a meaningful connection with somebody. And again, sticking to the personal, because at the end of the day, we're all human, right? And at the end of the day, you know, we need to respect each other's differences. The goal of a One Small Step conversation, and this is one of the ground rules that we set at the beginning, is don't try to persuade each other. One Small Step conversations are 50 minutes, and that's for a reason, right? So you can't convince anyone of anything in 50 minutes unless maybe you're a really good salesperson. So, you know, the goal is not to persuade each other, but to hear somebody out and to talk about your own perspective as well. So those are just some helpful tips that I would like to share with all of you, that StoryCorps wants to share with all of you. And, you know, it can hopefully facilitate some meaningful conversations with friends, with family, or maybe even with strangers. And so I'd like to bring Alice back on. Hi, Alice.
Hey, Sonia. That was great. I found it really interesting. And I have to say, one of my favorite lines was when Tony said, "I'm not trying to change your mind." And, you know, if we all just listened a little more and were willing to, you know, assume that the other person isn't necessarily trying to change our mind, but is perhaps just offering a different perspective, that could certainly broaden our own worldview. So I really enjoyed it. And, you know, it is just taking that one small step to do these conversations, but it is a building block upon which other things can happen.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's been really amazing to see how One Small Step participants, a lot of them expressed that they wanted to participate in this project to prove to themselves that they could do it, but also to kind of serve as a model to others to show that it can be done. You don't need to block somebody because you disagree with them. You don't need to shut them out of your life. There might be some validity in listening to somebody else's opinion, and you might learn from it, and they might learn from that exchange as well. So yeah, it was really amazing to see that people wanted to model that and then put that in an archive at the Library of Congress, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that most of the people who signed up really were doing it out of this sort of mission that they did want to sort of heal the divisiveness in our country. They weren't coming at it from an aggressive standpoint. So that's kind of nice. I think it's a way of filtering out people who perhaps have crueler, harsher intentions, and gives people who just want to, reach out and hear about other perspectives and opportunity. So is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up? It's been about an hour.
Yeah. So I just want to invite everyone who's listening to keep this project in mind as we all enter a season where we're gathering potentially with friends and family and people we haven't seen in a long time. You might come across people you don't see eye to eye with. You might overhear an opinion that you may or may not agree with. And just remember that the first step is listening. So in the chat, you'll find a link to a DIY One Small Step guide that will kind of explain to you how to conduct a conversation like this on your own. And if you are interested in archiving it, how to do that on the StoryCorps archive, or just, do it without archiving it. I think the most important thing is that we make these conversations happen. We want this project to live beyond the station, beyond StoryCorps. We want all of you to take one small step at the end of the day. So before we go, I'd be remiss without saying some thank yous. I want to thank the whole KVPR team for being on board with this project, for the support. Alice, thank you. And David Aus, who has been in the background.
Doing this whole show.
Doing this whole show, making sure it
Thanks,
happens.
David.
Thank you, David, if you can hear us. And yeah, thank you to Joe Moore and to StoryCorps for trusting us with this work. And in particular, Jacqueline Van Meter from StoryCorps, if you're watching, for her tremendous support throughout this project.
Exactly.
And you can find all the stories that you heard today on kvpr.org. The full length version is on archive.storycorps.org. And Nathan and Tony's story will air tomorrow on Valley Edition on 89.3. So be sure to catch that at 1 and 7 tomorrow. And of course, the One Small Step Communities Project wouldn't be possible without the support of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, as well as StoryCorps' many other generous supporters. So a big thank you to them.
And thank you to you. And I hope our listeners over the holidays take a few moments to maybe reach out to someone who they might not understand or just want to know more. See what their story is. Just see what you can learn and take that one small step. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.